Hi, everyone. Hi, and welcome. Welcome to our Digital Twins webinar. We'll just wait a moment for others to join, but we don't want to keep you waiting, so let's get started. Let me do some quick introductions. I'm Sven. I'm Senior Strategy Director at Humanate, and I'm joined here by Annalise, who is our Chief Innovation Officer and one of the brains behind our Twins approach. So I'm really happy for her to be here because she'll be able to explain things a lot better than I can. So what are we going to do over the next 45 minutes? We'll explore the general opportunity of AI in supporting decision making. We'll obviously explain what we mean when we talk about digital twins and how they work, and also share some early use cases. Throughout the session, feel free to share thoughts or reactions in the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. If questions come up along the way, please drop them into the questions tab. And you can also upvote questions. If there are questions there that you feel are really relevant to you, too, you can upvote them. And we'll try to answer as many as possible live in the chat or during the Q&A at the end. And finally, don't forget the emojis. Feel free to use them if you'd like to react, to agree, or simply show what's resonating as we go along. But before, oh, that's great. Thank you for the emoji. So before we get to the main content, it would be great to understand a little bit more about you. So let's kick off with a couple of very quick questions on you and your business use of AI, particularly in consumer insights. So first question, very simple. Which of the following best describes your organization's perspective on using AI in consumer insights? And you have a choice here. Just pick the one that's closest to your position in your organization. One choice only, and then submit your vote. Okay, and I will hopefully see the answers. Will I see the answers? I can't see the answers. Oh, this is great. Okay, let me see. Yes, I can see the answers. Here I am. I was looking in the wrong in the wrong plan. So nobody so far is doing everything with AI, but also nobody said hands off. So most of us are somewhere in the middle. A lot of us experimenting in specific areas. Let's look at the second poll question. So let's move on to the second question. And the second question is, where do you see the future of AI in consumer insights? That should pop up any second. Here it is. And here you can pick multiple answers. Do you use it to improve briefings, processes, reports, optimize stimulus? Are you using persona avatars in meetings, for example? Do you think that we're no longer going to talk to real people at all in the future? Is it more about analyzing vast amounts of unstructured data? Do we think that AI will replace us all, or none of the above? So you can choose as many of those as you like and submit, and then we'll see. Okay, so the answers are coming up here. Okay, a lot of improving processes, briefings, analyzing data, optimizing stimulus. They very clearly have quite a lot of votes. Avatars and virtual consumers are quite low. And thankfully, most of us still don't think that AI will replace us completely. So that's some good news for today, at least. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. That's really useful as context. And what we'd like to do is look at some of the sort of background of this, some of the broader challenges, hopefully some things that will feel familiar to you. So what is actually moving us or pushing us to use AI more and more? there's the pace of change, consumers are fickle, the business environment is turbulent and difficult. And we are sort of being pushed to use AI to solve a lot of our problems. Now, let's take a look at that in a little bit more depth. Where is all of this coming from? So, in our annual What Matters survey earlier this year, we saw almost two-thirds of consumers globally feel that brands are interchangeable. This came from a big global study we ran with 15,000 people across 15 markets. And the biggest consumer trend we attributed this to was called hyperblanding, which is the idea that styles, ideas, aesthetics spread instantly and they get copied faster than ever before. So for a lot of people, the feeling is that the clothes they wear, the content they consume is starting to look the same. Let's take a look at a really concrete example, quite an ironic example, actually. So take a look at all of these companies. I don't know if it's easy to recognize the companies, if it's easy to recognize all the different companies that are there, and if it's easy to see which company is which. When you remove the names, something really interesting happens. All of these logos start to look really similar. They're all circular with a sort of a focal point in the middle, soft organic curves. They all have a similar shape and a similar mood. And it's not because they're trying to copy each other. These are some of the highest invested companies in the world at the moment. So many of them AI companies. It's because they're trying to communicate the same things. They're trying to say we're smart, we're modern, we're trustworthy. And when everyone tries to communicate the same thing and uses AI, arguably, to create a visual impression of what that might mean, things start to look remarkably alike. So it's a really nice example to show how differentiation slowly disappears and it becomes really difficult to recognize even the brands that you use. At least it was for me. Another nice example of this was what we saw in the World Cup. We suddenly saw pink football boots everywhere. And it wasn't because brands were copying each other, but it was because they were responding to the same signals. Pink offered high visibility on television and in social media, and some trend forecasting agencies had already identified electric fuchsia as the main color trend for 2026. But the ironic thing about this is that everybody wanted to stand out, but nobody did, to paraphrase a famous quote from Karl Lagerfeld. So, by following the same data and the same trend signals, they all ended up looking very, very similar. And why is this? It is because um, AI sort of amplifies the phenomenon of niche or local brands becoming mainstream overnight and blurring into a sort of global sameness. Because it draws from existing patterns, it reinforces sameness rather than originality. And generative AI naturally gravitates towards what's already common or typical, and the distinctiveness of trends and ideas on the fringe become blurred. So, left on its own, what AI will do is to reinforce the statistical middle, the lowest common denominator, rather than to create something genuinely distinctive. And as insights and marketing professionals, we know the need for human and cultural understanding is ongoing. The world and consumers don't stand still. And we also know that a lot of consumers are saying their priorities keep changing as a result of everything going on in the world. Anybody who's followed the way we think about Gen Z over the last ten years will see that. I mean, some of the things we said about Gen Z 2 or 3 years ago have shifted a little bit because things have changed and things have moved on, which means that for brands, relevance isn't something you define once and you own it forever. It's something you have to continuously work on and continuously earn. And then on the other hand, consumers are evolving quickly, but brands are struggling to keep up. In fact, 88% of business executives say that customers are changing faster than the organizations can adapt. So we're in a sort of a in a paradox. The paradox of our times is that we need brands and ideas and products that differentiate. We need to find them. We need deep consumer understanding, but we also need speed to market. So we're sort of stuck in this contradiction of needing to go deep, but also needing to be fast. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. And the answer to all of this, of course, is AI. That's what we're told. AI will solve all of our problems. But when we're thinking about how people want to interact with brands and products today and in the coming years, the real competitive advantage will not be for those who have the smartest or the most capable AI, but it will be for those who understand where people still matter most and how you get the best from both. As AI becomes commonplace, we're seeing evidence that qualities like judgment, empathy, creativity, accountability are becoming more valuable, not less, because this is what makes us or gives us a differentiator in the sea of automated sameness. That incidentally is the title of our September webinar, so please register for part 2, where we'll talk more about this sea of sameness and how to overcome it. But we think here for today, the future question for marketers will be less human versus AI and more, what role should each play across different moments of customer understanding and experience? There is probably a role for both. Consumers themselves are becoming more comfortable using AI for guidance and in everyday decisions. A lot of our research points to that, and so are marketeers. But in moments that feel uncertain, emotional, or consequential, human capabilities and intuition will remain important or maybe even become more important, precisely because everything else is automated. And this is no different for us as insight and marketing professionals. We face exactly the same tension every day. So at Human 8, we're really clear that we should be thinking about the challenge that we face today as this. As AI becomes more capable, which parts of our work would benefit from greater automation and which will become increasingly meaningful when they stay distinctly human? And we believe that digital twins can bring us the best of both. I'll now hand over to Annalise to explain.
Thank you, Sven. So, I'm going to talk about a way to address some of the challenges that Sven has just mentioned, and this is through Humanate's digital twins. Let me make this a little bit more tangible for you by starting to explain first what a digital twin actually is. So, a digital twin is basically a data driven representation, an AI representation of a real person. And the idea is that this representation can simulate behavior, thoughts, and feelings. Once it's set up, you can typically talk through a platform like you see here on the screen with the twins. And as these data are generated through interaction with a machine, not a real human, it's a form of synthetic data. Now, I can imagine that you are a bit lost in all the labels that are used when it comes to synthetic data. You know, there's so much different labels that are used at this moment. So I thought also, just for clarity, let's make sure that we all are on the same place. So within synthetic data, there's largely two domains. We have augmented data, which means that we are creating additional data, typically rows or columns, to an existing study. A classic example we all know from the past is, for example, weighting. But of course, there's newer techniques around now. In addition, we also have something which is called fully synthetic or wholly synthetic. And that means that you're generating data for a completely new study. And when doing so, there is an important distinction to make between the source that's used for creating of such fully synthetic data, as it can or it cannot be linked to real people. And obviously, within the insight industry, we typically prefer to ground it in real people because we see there's many advantages to that. Within that space, again, there's two different kind of, I would say, yeah, dimensions. you have the twins and you have the personas. I can imagine, of course, that you also wonder what's now actually the difference between a digital twin and an AI persona. And I would like to start by just showing to you what they have in common. And that's the interaction method, because for both of them, the interface typically looks like a chat interface. You see a representation of a person, and then you can chat with one person or with multiple people at the same time. So that's very similar. But what you have to realize is that how they are built, that is done in quite a different way. For AI persona or avatar, it typically is built so that your AI representation represents a segment, a group. It's aggregated and therefore also static, right? The main difference with a twin is that a twin is built at an individual level. So that means that you can decide to talk to one twin if you would want to, but you're also flexible to talk to different twins at the same time. And you can group them in different groups. So, for example, for the twins, I can still talk to my segments, but I can also take a completely different way and slice and dice depending on my business needs my twins differently. I can look at early adopters within the group, people that liked previous IDs, people that are considering to switch brands, and so on. And depending on your business needs, there can be both a role for personas and for twins. For personas, typically it's whenever you need a more simplification of the world. That's also how personas are typically used, let's say, in marketing. But we do believe that digital twins give a more precise and flexible and dynamic view of how your customer thinks and and acts in the market. So, how do we start building those twins? Now, in our opinion, the key to success is deep human understanding. And that is what we're using as a starting point for the twin community. When we're creating a digital twin, there's a few things that you need to do. The first thing that you need to do is what we call is to create the identity card for the twin. And that's effectively a rich description mimicking how a real human thinks and feels about the topic. It contains information, of course, on the individual, but also on social and contextual dimensions. In addition, you can also choose to extend your twins with memories. And these are typically lived experiences from the real people that guide the twin on what to answer when running simulations. Now, as we all know, real people are messy. And we try as much as possible to capture that messiness at an individual level, also within our twins. It also means that they need to be refreshed from time to time. And this is, of course, to stay relevant given the speed at which consumers change. How often you need to do this will depend, typically depending on your category and how often behavior changes. So, for something, for example, like fashion, it could be very regularly, but finance, maybe potentially a few times a year, is more than enough. It really depends on your market conditions and your brands. No, there's absolutely limitations to how we can use AI. And of course, one of the big challenges is around trust and having confidence what is told through the twin, for example, is really accurate. And to address this, we have created what we call a grounding score. So that means that for every twin, we're actually having an indication per answer to what extent the answer from the twin can be backed up by evidence from primary research or existing methods that we have been trusting for years, right? And this course kind of gives you a degree to know like how much of this is this interference and how much is it actually going back to something I know. Here you see an example. This was an example for coffee. And you see a couple of scenarios. The full fit scenario, or the highest fit scenario, was a scenario where we asked people, the twins, questions which were very close to the topic of the primary research that was used to create the twins from. So then, no surprise, we see a high grounding score. But you can also see an example where we have asked, in this case, a twin community about coffee, but we asked the twins a question about their pets. Obviously, there was no information available to the twin in what way about their pets. So we had a 0 grounding score. And that means that the twin is completely inferring based on what it does know, and of course the knowledge in large language models, and it's creating an answer based on that. And at that moment, it really becomes synthetic, right? Now, having a low grounding score is not necessarily a problem. Then actually you come to the second question, because it means the twin is going to interfere or fill in the blanks. And of course, you want to make sure that the twin is doing that in a good and reliable way. And here, some of the core, I would say, concepts from research in general are coming back. It's about reliability and validity. So I will give you some examples. For example, when you're creating the twin, it is really important that we make sure that's stable, so that every time you're asking the same question to the twin, it's giving me a similar answer, right? So that's what we call, for example, a test retest score. And we see on average that is 85% on higher, which we think is very okay, considering this is qualitative feedback, right? And if you would compare it with real humans, you probably would also not have, let's say, twice in an interview exactly the same answer. But also, of course, important to look at twin human similarity in a twin methodology, because you have this one-on-one connection. You can easily work, for example, with holdout question, where you're comparing, you give a completely new question that the twin has never seen, and it's also not in its trainings data, and you compare that output with what you know from the human. So these are measures that help you to test the reliability of what you've done. And of course, there's also validity, right? We want to know that the conclusion we would draw and the decision we would make based on the two human versus twin answers, if that would be the same or not. And here we always see that is dependent on the topic that you have built your community or your twin community for. But I can give you an example. For example, at certain moments, we were doing some research on packaging, and we had to make a decision on what type of pack would be most suitable for a new product innovation. What we saw is that the twins were picking in 79% of the case in package 3C, and that same was happening for humans. And this is, of course, showing then that actually the direction of the recommendation would be the same, and the decision is the same as well. So that's a little bit about, I would say, fidelity of what we're doing. So how does this work really in practice? Now, to be very concrete, so there's different ways, of course, in which that we can create a twin, but the core will always be primary data at the individual level with a qualitative background. We often do this through a community because it allows us to, collect this deep data, also some observational maybe data, some self-declared, some survey data to create a twin, but it can also be any other source. What is important is that is your proprietary data, and this is not a public data set that we're taking as a general true for everything and everyone. The individuals from the communities are then used, or from the other qualities, are used to create the digital twins, and that gives you the speed to act before the moment passes. And consultants from Humanate are with you all the way to design both the right setup of the twins, but also to help you run simulations and interpret the signals in a good way, and of course to turn that understanding in big ideas and also good strategies. So let me show you how this looks in daily life. I'm going to show you a quick demo where I'm showing you some dummy data on a coffee project. And this is an example of how a digital twin looks and feels. I'm using here a coffee example to give you a real world context, but the use case can apply across sector and business challenge. So imagine today, you're working for a coffee brand, and this week you have several decisions to make: pack changes, maybe campaign line, range call, and normally each of one could take weeks maybe to research, or often time might not allow maybe to use any insights at all, right? But here we are. We have our live twin portal, and in this case, it contains 24 coffee drinkers. And actually, I can talk to them anytime. They're based on real human data. They're not personas, they're not averages. Everyone is built from the real person's own words, their kitchens, their rituals, their last jobs. It's real people, real lives. You can also see how rich the profile is from each of the individual twins here. There's their relationship with coffee, what they value, what would make them switch in their own voice. So I can go deep on any of them. So ways we could use this. Well, let's imagine again, it's Monday morning. I'm in a meeting with my team and we are in discussion about the potential of a new coffee offer focused on a specific occasion. And actually our team is split and we're divided on whether people are actually open to buy yet another type of coffee. Instead of guessing it, we can ground our discussion in reality and I can ask the twins what sort of coffee they are ready buy today and why. So in seconds, I can have a good sense of what coffee people are consuming. As you can see here, we have asked the question to the twins and they're answering. And you see immediately what's emerging. It seems like in this case, most have around 2 to 4 brands. A sense of occasion is definitely key. And we see that like the everyday coffee sits behind besides like a backup and even a for guests type of coffee. Sharp offers makes that people join and try something new, and different coffee formats can really make a difference. No, can happen. Somebody in the room is challenging me, and they say that this might be fine maybe for a general coffee brand across the market, but they can also point out that they think that our brand is maybe more premium, a more specialty coffee. So probably our users are maybe more loyal to us. So you reply and you can say like, okay, let's just check that assumption. And I think the great thing with Twins is because it's based on individual consumers, as I said before, you can slice as dice it as you need. So I can go back in here. I'm in the results section. I can look at the raw results and I can really look at our brand users and see, uh, yeah, if that assumption actually is valid or if it can be challenged. So imagine finally that the team is aligned on the assumptions, and now you're having actually a discussion that is about where can you find growth opportunities. Another member of the team is wondering if we could grow by attracting new customers who normally do not buy specialty coffee with a barista like instant coffee. So let's quickly kind of pressure test this idea. So I can, ask my question, but also when asking the question, I can already zoom in. For example, in this case, on consumers who are not yet users of specialty brands, right? And I can ask this question targeted at this group. I can look again at what they're answering. Yeah, the results will show up, and I can see, okay, maybe there is an opportunity here. We see that several customers say that this could be a nice weekend treat for the brand. Ultimately, yeah, it's the taste that will make the differentiator, not so much the way in which it's made. So an important pointer maybe on how we might market this opportunity and so on. And I hopefully think this gives you a bit of a flavor of how having these twins at your side can really perk up, I would say, your morning meeting. So the simple way, in conclusion, to think of the twins is that they bring the best of both worlds. It's on the one hand, deep and reliable proprietary human understanding, combined with the ability to ask questions fast and to really reflect that speed of decision making in your business with real time simulations, allowing you to build intelligence of consumers in your markets. So, Sven, back to you.
Thank you very much. I've also been following some of the questions in the question chat, and I'll try to address some of the points as far as I can in the following slides. So we're going to stick to the coffee example for a second because I think this example highlights how, again, where the data comes from and also why it's valuable to have these twins in the first place. There was a question, why don't we just talk to people? Um, we can, of course, but there is a value in having these twins that is a little bit beyond the value of just doing more research. So um, again, I'd like to emphasize each twin is based on a real person. involved in a real project. The example that we showed came from Taylor's of Harrogate, a coffee company. They came to Humanate. They had a question that was nothing about digital twins. It was all about a phenomenon in the coffee category that has always been a challenge for them. It's a typical say-do gap where consumers love talking about premium coffee. They love talking about premium coffee experiences. There's a lot of intention to try and to experiment and to discover premium experiences. But when they're in front of the supermarket shelf, their behavior tells a very different story. And they are led by other things rather than their desire for premium experiences. And we were looking at an innovation in the pipeline for tailors where we knew this say do gap would be really, really key or play a really critical role for a new product idea. People were likely to love the idea, but there was a very, very good chance that in front of the shelf, they would buy the product that's on special offer. So we wanted an approach that would not just capture intent, but also behavior, and also to embed the whole idea development process really in sort of real world decisions where people's intentions break down. So what we did was we built an online community, a pop-up community that ran over about a week with the people of whom the twins you just saw, is that the right way of saying it? But the twins you just saw built on these people, and we had a lot of tasks and topics over the week. Topics around intention. So what do they love about coffee? What do they love about premium coffee? And all of these things. But then also very concrete sort of in-store situations, missions, diaries, and discussions. So to really get this mix of intention and behavior. Very similar to what we would have done if we were just conducting a piece of research, which is ultimately what we were doing. But we felt in this research, we thought it might be quite interesting to collect some data that would help us to build the twins as well. So the twins were built on the back of a very concrete piece of research, but we also collected some additional data that helped us then to build the twins. Now the research was I think good, and it delivered a really interesting model for understanding how this say do gap actually affects people's decisions. So we were able to map consumer reality and then the levers that brands could play to resolve tensions, and we called them the fragilities around actually doing things that people intend to do. And we were really able to identify these key tensions at play and talk to tailors about how they might resolve these. And this was really well received. The innovation was also well received. But ultimately, um, yes, useful stuff, but between this moment of research and the actual product launch, there's still a lot of time and still a lot of decisions need to be made. And this is where sometimes research falls short because it can provide this great theoretical model. But when it actually comes to, so what actually happens if I put this on my pack? We can't answer the question because we've got the model, but we can't ask the consumers again. We could do more research, of course, but this is where digital twins were interesting to actually look at the iterations of the innovation in the course of time after we'd done this initial piece of research and to use the twins to help guide us along the way. And this is where they came in. So, in concrete terms, what happened once we completed the community, we still had access to these consumers or their twin versions to, let's start on the right, sort of complex what if scenarios. So what if we had this and we offered it at this price? How would that change the story? We were able to do sort of marketing outcome sprints. So to look at different sort of types of packaging and how they might affect the way this innovation actually comes to the shelf. And also then to explore these with twins. And it was really sort of also a great tool for everyday decision making, the sort of small things you want to test, messaging, a claim here, a claim there. And you could always pass them by the twins and then maybe make a more informed decision. So the twins as an accompaniment for guidance after this sort of foundational piece of research had been completed. So what the twins were able to do were to take this model that we've developed and actually to help people understand how this actually comes to life in their day-to-day marketing decisions, to amplify the great research that was conducted and to help to guide and to shape the marketing outcomes along the journey of development of the ideas. And the marketing team really experienced the benefit of that in helping to refine concepts. The say do gap was always there because it was part of the theme of the research, and it was all happened at the pace of their project. I mean, one of the advantages of twins is you can ask them 10 questions the same. You can ask them the same question 10 times. They will never get tired. They will never get bored. You can give them 50 claims to talk about, and they will talk about each claim as if it was the first one they talked about because they are digital twins. They are a little bit less prone to becoming fatigued than real people are. So that was the coffee example. We also have a second example, which we'll be able to talk about a little bit more in the next webinar. The reason we can't talk about it now is because it's going to be presented for the first time at the ESMAR Congress in Valencia. We're really excited because we've already had 5 nominations for awards, 3 ESMAR awards and 2 Best Paper awards, and would like to give you a quick sort of preview of what we've been working on and how we took the digital methodology and did something that we wouldn't have been able to do with a simple research approach. So the general background is that we helped Coca-Cola developing a new innovation pipeline for one of their brands. The project covered a larger innovation cycle, including both foundational insighting through a research community, then ideation sessions that were also AI enabled and creative expert guided. And we co-created a pipeline with different stakeholders in the organization. And then there was also some quant validation. And what we did on the back of this was to think about how we could use twins for future scenario planning. When we do innovation today for the customer of tomorrow, it's always a challenge to anticipate how the world will have changed once the new product or service are actually launched. And it's very difficult for consumers to anticipate the future. However, with the twins, we could change that because we could take the twins based on real people, and we could get them to project into future worlds. The future worlds that were developed by our colleagues by Space Doctors, future scenarios, and we could project the twins into these future scenarios and get them to behave and react as if they were in these future scenarios, which is a really, really exciting application, something that real consumers find quite difficult. It's possible as well, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's not so easy. But twins can actually do that quite well. And the approach generated 2 or 3 times more high quality innovation directions and produce very actionable R&D guidance. So they don't predict the future, nothing can predict the future, but they gave teams greater confidence, richer consumer perspectives, and a dynamic framework for making future facing innovation decisions. As I say, more about this in September, so please join our webinar then. So just a couple of minutes at the end before we get to the questions to summarize. Hopefully, throughout, you'll have taken away that digital twins can help organizations to keep learning, keep testing, keep applying human understanding, even when the research has finished. It sort of extends the life of a piece of research and embeds it more into the decision making processes. Digital twins aren't a shortcut, they're a companion. They're an accompaniment to strong research. They're not a substitute. And we believe they bring the best of human and AI together. They're not a magic wand, and they're only as good as the people around them. And by the people, we mean the people behind them. So they are built on real human data and real people and individuals, not just accumulated data. And that's really important. So they behave like individuals. They are curated and created by research experts. So they don't build themselves. Experts, researchers shape every twin. It's not just an algorithm. A twin is created, and a twin is built. They are rooted in knowledge, the knowledge that you have in the client companies. They're tailored to your context and designed to grow over time and to develop over time. And they're a decision companion. So they don't make the decision for you, they are a companion to help you and your teams to make more informed decisions. And obviously, also at some points to say, we want to make a different decision to what we're hearing here. But we've made it knowing that this is what our twins have said. So, how do you get started? There's some thought starters here, just things to think about if you're thinking about working with this type of augmented synthetic data. Um, and really, it's always really important to start with your business goal and to start with the decisions you want to make rather than with the technology. Technology is there, the technology is everywhere, but you need to find a way to apply the technology in a way that makes most sense for you. You need to involve your people from the outset. One of the reasons why the coffee case worked so well is that we were very transparent and we involved the team during the whole development of the teams and the platform, which because it was new for us as well, and you need to see where it works and where maybe things don't work as you're expecting them. And there we come to the guardrails as well. Very clearly need an AI charter. You need real consent, obviously, from the people. That's a really important point. So we don't just build twins without the consent of the people we're building them from. Data security, trust is really important, and guardrails on what you're going to do with these twins. They're great to accompany a marketing idea development process. You wouldn't use them to quantitatively validate something that you're doing. That would be very dangerous. But they can help you while you're building your ideas. And it's a learning process for everybody. For us, for everybody working with these new tools, we need to learn. We need to learn and improve, and we need to think about this as something that isn't just for today or for tomorrow and just for once. It's something that's built to last. And we believe that twin communities are refreshable. You will be able to continue to interact with them over time as long as they are updated and they are adopted into your workflows. And of course, we're always here to help if there are any of these aspects you would like to discuss, any areas where you need deeper human understanding fast. We can help to move on from there with the discussions on the value that twins can bring and how best to develop them for your organization. I think that's it. I hope that wasn't too fast and too much. Before we come to the Q&A, could you very quickly scan the QR code here and give us some feedback, because that's really useful for us, and it can help us to shape future editions of the webinar, and to iron things out where maybe they weren't so clear. So if you could take a second to complete the questionnaire, and then I think we have 3 minutes exactly for some questions. So I'll just go back to the question chat. Okay. Um, lots more questions now. I don't know if we can answer them all. If we can't answer them here, we can maybe answer individually afterwards. Oh, we have a question on where do they fail the most? Annalise, do you have any experience? It's always
Yes.
interesting. Where do they not work?
Yeah, and I think that's a super important question, because I think twins can be great, but they clearly have limitations. I can share with you three areas where I think twins, and to maybe by extension a lot of the synthetic data approaches, are not suitable. I think the first one is it when it comes to really white space detection. Every synthetic solution, including twins, it starts from the data and it will always be bound to the data. So if you're really looking to do something out of the box, white space detection, then actually this is not your method to go to, right? So I think that is one important one. A second one is that we see that questions which are either very normative in nature or I would say also very much based on knowledge retrieval and awareness can be tricky. I will give you an example back to maybe coffee. At a certain moment, when it comes to coffee and, for example, like ethical practices in coffee production, etc., you will see that your twins will be more skewed to social normative answers than sometimes your real humans are. And this is, of course, because they're built in the back of large language models, and these models have been trained to behave in a certain way. And that's a bias that is in there. That, as for now, I think, yeah, it's one of the limitations of this methodology. And the same holds when it comes to knowledge. Another example on coffee. At a certain moment, we mentioned something about a region in Ethiopia. It was part of the concept. A lot of the twins knew which flavor and characteristics beans from that region had. Normally, people don't know that, right? So they are, based on those data and hence know sometimes more. So, as with any, I would say, approach, you have to know how to use them and also not to use them sometimes. And that's
Okay.
important.
Thank you, Annalise. I see there are a lot of questions, so we'll try to answer those individually. I hope some of them we were able to answer now in the last part of the webinar as well, because one of the beauty of digital twins is that they are individual people, so that we can cluster and group them as we want, just like we can in an online community or in a sample, a qualitative sample. So that's, I think, hopefully some of those advantages have come through. But there are some questions also on how we refresh twins that become a little bit more technical that we can obviously also answer individually after the webinar. So thank you very much for joining us because we've reached the end of our 45 minutes. I think we still have a slide with our contact details if you want to reach out for us. To us individually, or we don't. Well, we do. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the session, and please feel free to reach out and ask more and more questions. We're excited by this. I hope you noticed that, and we're excited to exchange and discuss and hear your thoughts as well, because this is obviously a very new, but we feel very I'll repeat myself, exciting development of today for the future. So thank you very much and have a good afternoon or evening.